What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, and today I want to take a look at who could be potentially headlining UFC 300, which is going down next year. Now, this is obviously a special card because it is UFC 300, and there are a load of fighters who are looking to get on that pay-per-view come next year. We've had a couple of fights that have been recently announced for the January, February, and March pay-per-view, which goes as follows. We have Strickland and DDP headlining in January. We have Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria headlining in February. And then we have Sean O'Malley facing Chito Vera, which will be headlining the event in March. So I would probably say we can count all those guys out for a fight at UFC 300. And of course, at the time of this video, in a couple of weeks, we have Leon Edwards taking on Colby Covington. And while there is time for a turnaround after this fight, both of these guys are not the most active fighters at all. So I would say we could probably rule out them two for a headline spot for UFC 300. And then, of course, we have the two biggest stars in the sport. We have Conor McGregor. His long-awaited return is probably going to be delayed once again, as I mentioned in my last video about McGregor, which you should definitely check out. And we also have John Jones, who got injured, supposed to headline the past pay-per-view at Madison Square Garden in November, but he pulled out due to injury, and he was set to face Stipe Miocic in a legacy fight. But doesn't look like that will be ready for UFC 300 either. It just doesn't seem like Jones will be fit for that card. So after you filter out all of those matchups, you kind of really slim it down to only a couple of guys that could really headline this card. So let me give you some of my options that I've come up with. It's important to remember too that this is UFC 300. This is a massive card, and they're going to want to have a big fight in the main event spot. And they're going to probably try and stack up the rest of this card as well, because they're going to try and go all out for this. This is a big pay-per-view. So my personal opinion, I think the fight that probably makes the most sense with all the options that we have as a headliner is probably the rematch between Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira. I know it's a fight that has mixed opinions because we just saw what Islam did to Volkanovski, and we've already seen Charles and Islam fight, but at the end of the day, these are still two of the biggest stars in the sport. Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira will both sell. This rematch will definitely sell, and I don't see why this wouldn't be a fitting headliner for this event. You will have to put other fights on this card, which they will, and I could also see them putting another pretty big fight in the co-main as well. And that co-main, this is what I would want to see, by the way. I want to see Adesanya come back and try his luck out at light heavyweight in a trilogy fight with Alex Pereira. I know it sounds crazy. It's unlikely to see Adesanya in a co-main spot as well, but this is UFC 300. You can kind of sell it as a double header main event, and it would just be a great fight to have. I know that some people feel that this is finished, but this isn't finished. This rivalry will never be finished until both of these boys retire, and this is probably the biggest rivalry we have in the UFC right now. Alex Pereira, Israel Adesanya. We just saw what Alex Pereira did to Yuri Prochazka, and he claimed the light heavyweight throne. It would be great to see Adesanya try and go up and challenge for that belt and become a multi-division champion, just as Alex was. And there's still a little bit of bad blood there. I mean, we saw Pereira's call out at the end of his fight with Yuri Prochazka, and he clearly still wants Adesanya. He wants to redeem that loss that he took to him in April, and he believes he can get the job done once again, which of course he does. He's already done it 3 times. So I think this is a really compelling fight. The only issue is, I don't know if Adesanya wants this. There's been talks and rumors that I've heard that he's really been pushing for Jamal Hill to get the next title shot against Pereira. It really does seem like Izzy wants to take a decent amount of time away from the sport. He, of course, went out and did say he wanted to return in 2027, which I just don't see happening. I don't think he's going to take 3 years off, but I think he wants a little bit more time off, and I don't know if he really wants to fight Pereira at UFC 300. I also don't know if he would take a co-main spot because he feels he still is the biggest star, which is fair because he probably is still the biggest star in the UFC, and I would understand why he wouldn't want a co-main. However, this is UFC 300, and you got to stack this card up, and if you can have a fight like Pereira and Adesanya in the co-main, then that would be amazing. And you could, of course, argue that Adesanya and Pereira is potentially a bigger fight then Oliveira and Islam, and maybe you could push Oliveira and Islam to the co-main. But I don't know. It's kind of a 50-50. Personally, I still think the Charles and Islam fight is a little bit bigger just because it's only the second time we'd be seeing it, and there's still a ton of hype behind both guys. Whereas Izzy, people still love him, still appreciate him, but there is a lot of question marks regarding his career right now and what he can actually do at light heavyweight, considering he did go up once and he failed. Honestly, I think that's just the perfect main and co-main event for this card. I don't see McGregor coming back. Like I said, I don't see Jones coming back. So it makes perfect sense. Now, another option I do think that the UFC might decide to go with, should things work out, is either Dricus du Plessis or Sean Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 300. I think that's a fight that they would love to make, and one that they would definitely accelerate and try and get on that April pay-per-view. Should Strickland or DDP come out with not a lot of damage in their fight in January, I think we could see a quick turnaround for either of those guys at UFC 300. And Khamzat Chimaev being on that card would obviously make it amazing, and you could definitely probably cut out one of those co-mains if you put that fight on the card. But that's also going to be very tough. We don't know how hurt Khamzat really is. We don't know if he'll be ready for April, and there's no telling if Strickland or DDP would be ready or willing to have a quick turnaround like that to be on that card. Even if you can get Strickland or DDP on the card, I think trying to get Khamzat on there would be still a really good idea. I think put him up against another big middleweight, potentially rebook the Paulo Costa fight. It seems unlikely, probably not going to happen, but maybe even a Robert Whittaker. Let's do Whittaker and Chimaev. I think that's a great fight. That's a great feature fight that you could have on the card, and it would definitely bring eyeballs, that's for sure. There's so many options. It seems like there aren't too many because of all these guys booked up, but there really are a lot of options for this UFC 300 card. If you have Charles and Islam, you can have Izzy and Pereira or someone else in the co-main, maybe DDP and Khamzat, or you just have Khamzat take on a guy like Robert Whittaker. There's been guys like Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje. That's been kind of rumored for the BMF belt. A really fun fight, and I would love to see that on that card. I just don't know if that's the direction the UFC wants to go with that. And there's also Dustin Poirier, who's also said that he would like to be on that card. So there's just so many options, and I'm just hoping the UFC makes the right choice. So if I were to have it my way, I would go Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev 2 in the main event spot. And in the co-main, I would like to see Adesanya versus Pereira. I know it's unlikely, but I'm just going to go with that because I'd love to see that. And then in the featured fight, let's do Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev. I think that's fun. And if we don't do that, let's do Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje for the BMF belt. I think that's a perfect UFC 300 card. It's stacked, it's amazing, and it's perfect for a pay-per-view of this stature. That's what I think, and I think it would be really amazing. But I want to hear what you guys have to say. Who do you guys think should be headlining UFC 300? Do you think I'm spot on here with who I think should be in there? Or do you guys have a couple of other ideas that maybe I didn't think about that could work out better? Let me know down in the comments below. I want to thank you guys for watching another one of these videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.